Welcome to Decker Tech. I'm Aaron Decker, and today we're doing a Magnus starting deck guide. This is, of course, on max difficulty, and I took all the divinations, but just the shard rewards, so I didn't take any of the cards. So that means that this should be the worst possible deck Magnus will have, and you should always be able to build a deck better than this. So, and this deck is plenty viable to get me all the way through the end, so it should be, like I said, everything is uphill from here. So let's go through it. First off, I took out all but one Rend and one Fast Strike. The Fast Strike and Rend will eventually go in Act 2, but it's nice to have a little bit of attack cards, and we really don't have to modify Magnus too much in Act 1. Honestly, some of what I've changed here, I don't have to, and sometimes I'll funnel the shards into the other characters, so that is one thing to keep in mind. A lot of what I have here is just kind of luxury items. Magnus's starting deck is really good. I think requireds, though, is you have to add in these Intimidates, preferably the yellow version that does more vulnerable stacks and vanishes, but that's a little bit of a luxury for me. What I should have done is these should be upgraded, and the repair armor shouldn't, but that was kind of a mistake on my part. It's not a big enough one to really matter, and I wouldn't reset a run for it, but Intimidates are a high priority on making sure that that one extra vulnerable stack with perks that becomes out to 3. That means that you're actually incrementing the vulnerable a lot faster, and that's Magnus's number 1 job is get vulnerable on all the enemies, and then number 2 job is kind of protect himself and the team. To protect himself, you'll keep in a couple defends. Honestly, they're the worst card in his deck, or one of the worst cards in his deck. Sorry, the Fast Strikes are probably a little worse most of the time. You'll kind of rely on, he starts with Reinforce. You'll use Shake It Off to dispel a debuffs. Again, if I had more shards, Dispel 3. That would be the way to go. You just cast this at the end of the turn, and you don't want to worry about the discarding a card part, right? So just always save this for the end of turn. If you have any debuffs, just cast it. It's really good use of your energy. The team, we're going to apply Barricade. If you don't have repair armors for some reason, then you'll want to upgrade the Barricade to the version that has Reinforce. The Reinforce means that your team's going to take less, physical damage. So that's what the repair armors are here for instead of upgrading the Barricade. Because eventually, in the later form, I'm actually going to be cutting Barricade. The Piercing Howl, this is a kind of a luxury item right here. Not really required because you do start with a Captain's Howl. But honestly, having, by the end of the game, 1 or 2 Piercing Howls plus your Captain's Howl is really good. You're just, like I said, trying to apply vulnerable and getting to 10 stacks and maintaining those 10 stacks. Right now, we don't really have a way to maintain 10 stacks. That needs to come in later. You'll either do that by upgrading to a blue Intimidate or getting a Carnage. Carnage is a melee attack that you can upgrade to one of the versions that has vulnerable, and it'll randomly attack people, but it applies, vulnerable as you do, so that's really great. Another way to do and the other way is really just the Intimidate, or there's a couple other cards that don't vanish that you'll need to use to keep those vulnerable stacks up. On the defense side of things, Intercept and Repair Armor will go a long way if used correctly to just target someone that is going to be attacked. Magnus, one of his biggest strengths is speed, and we'll talk about some items here to maintain that speed and keep him going first. And with that, you'll be able to hopefully know what enemies are attacking you. Like if you have sight for any reason, you'll know who's being attacked and why. And or just as you get to know the enemies, you'll know which ones will likely attack front line or back line, that kind of stuff. And you'll just plan accordingly by getting block on the right targets and then getting Reinforce on people taking physical damage. Enrage, he starts with Enrage. Fantastic. You want more of these if you can. This is a really great card. Another card that you'll want more of early on, but later not so much. If you could afford it, 2 War Paints is not amiss. These are just 0 cost, draw, replace themselves and vanish. So it's basically just reducing your deck size and making your starting turns more consistent. So you can always find the Barricades or the Piercing Howls and Captain Howls, like whatever you're looking for. Just putting War Paints in the deck will make that more efficient. Eventually, once you get the talent that reduces the cost of defenses, though, you'll want to start stepping away from Warpaint, just because the way the talent works, it doesn't affect cards you draw, just cards that start in your hand. So War Paints will eventually start to hurt you, but early in the game, they're a really good card, so I'd recommend. If I could, I'd just toss 2 of these in here and get rid of the Defend and Fast Strike, and I'd be happy. Yeah, if I had more shards, I'd still keep this Rend. I'd just upgrade it to the Rend target monster instead of front monster, so I could choose where I put the bleed. Very applicable to, say, Elder Dryad or Belfir or Yager in the Act 1 bosses. Rend doesn't do anything versus the tree, but all the other Act 1 fights, Rend is actually very powerful. If I have a super luxury, I would say, I think I can craft it here. Impale, the blue version of Impale is pretty good too. This is kind of the precursor to Carnage, and it's kind of a halfway Rend too. So I mention it because of the Rend being a bleed. This is just a better version, but it's 200 something shards, and it's not going to stay in your final deck. So this is a super luxury item. But like, say if you had a divination and this showed up, I'd happily take this in Act 1. Like, this is just a good sturdy Act 1 card, right? Then I don't think you'll be able to see it here because I can't do rares. Nope. Cards you're looking for in, say, Act 2 and 3 and maybe stay in your final deck is Push Forward. That's going to be, you're going to want the version that is basically, I think it's self gain 2 speed and grant 1 speed and X amount of block to the entire team. And that's just going to kind of replace your Barricade, because it also counts as a defense card and it's applying block to the whole team. You just want a little bit of AoE block and then some single target block. Later in the game, you're also going to get a card called Entrench. I would not craft that until Act 3, until you can afford to play it, since it has a base cost of 5 energy. And we want the version that has, wow, I can't even think of the word of it. Entrench. I said Entrench. That's the name of the card. It has the little castle thing. My words today. Fortify. Haha. So, you don't really want any self-fortify cards or single fortify cards, but you eventually want the AoE fortify so that you can AoE block the team and it'll carry over to the next turn. So the fortify option that's like an Act 2, Act 3. Don't really have to worry about it in the first act. The biggest issue you do got to worry about is making sure shackles come off yourself and that you go ahead of your team so that you can apply this block ahead of time, right? So as long as you're always going first, you don't really need the fortify until the later acts of the game. And even then, sometimes I go without it. But for your first couple of times, I would recommend just Entrench is a very safe bet for any tank Magnus. Let's go look at his talents. I think I covered everything in his cards. Yeah, we covered all his cards. Levels and traits. So you start with 2 Reinforce. This is very safe frontliner for that reason, because you take a lot less physical damage. And then we're going to go just down this right side here. Wolfguard. Often you'll put it on yourself, but really pay attention to the monsters in the fight. Sometimes you'll put this elsewhere. Also, if you say have like a self-burn Cornelius in your party, you can just throw this on him, because the base 15 all resistances, as long as this enchantment is on the target, they have these resistances. So if they're taking any like ticking damage, like if someone has a lot of spark, you could put this on someone next to them so that they don't kill the person next to them. Or like I said, someone that's got self-burn on them, or high stacks that's going to tick on them for some reason. Or specifically in Act 1, Yager does an attack that hits the lowest HP target, right? So if you know who that's going to be, Wolfguarding that target will be really nice to prevent them from taking too much damage from that. So Wolfguard is a very strong card. You'll keep it the entire game. Defense Mastery. We're going to be playing a lot of defense cards. This is the way to go. Everything just costs 1 less. And like I said, with those War Paints, if it doesn't start in your hand, it's not going to get the cost reduction. So drawing through our deck really quickly with War Paints will start to hurt us a little bit on the energy department. So you kind of have to weigh that balance of digging through your deck faster versus can I play all the cards I find. Valiant Defender. The highly overlooked part of this is a random hero gains Inspire. Yes, it's random, but Inspire is just very strong, right? And then let's not forget +6 shield charges. You're not really going to itemize for shield charges, but you're not going to say no to shield charges. And then of your 2 options down here, since we're going the tank version, all we want is energy regeneration. Immune to fatigue comes up very rarely in mostly Act 4. I mean, I guess Act 4 is really the only place since it's level 5. You're not going to have this in Act 1. The only other person I can think of fatigue happening is Act 1. So it's mainly just, I have more energy card. Don't get me wrong, it's nice, but nothing to write home about. Equipment. You'll probably keep the Wolf Slayer till the end of the game unless you find like a Nether Blade or something that adds plus vulnerable stacks, or maybe a Destiny to reduce the cost of cards in your hand. You'll kind of build a heavier deck if that's the case. Armor, we're looking for, there's a cloak that gives at the start of combat, get 2 fast and has +2 speed. You're really looking for speed is a big deal, and then resistances is like a secondary deal, right? You do want high resistances, but speed is a very important thing to you. You're not going to get like Iron Fortress or anything that reduces your speed. You're not going to get Plate Mail. You don't want anything that slows you down. You want things that keep you speed neutral or positive and that have decently high resists. And also, eventually you're going to buy the pet Sharpie. So this pet here, Wind Blessing, every turn dispel 1, gain 1 speed, right? Or fast. And so since Sharpie only activates on your turn, you're not going to be getting that fast on the beginning of combat. So you want your armor, your equipment to do that for you. And of the equipment, there's a jewelry Forest Crown that you can get in Act 1 that'll cover you, and then eventually there'll be some really nice armor at the end of the game that'll do that fast at the beginning of the turn combat for you. So between these 2 slots, you want fast at beginning of combat, and then you also want Sharpie. And that way you're always going ahead of the enemies, and you can always apply your block before the enemies take their turn. Accessory, it'll usually be some sort of either team benefiting item, or plus vulnerable charges, or skills cost 1 less sort of thing. Yeah. Don't really worry about plus block charges. You don't need those. Don't worry about reinforced charges. Don't worry about fortified charges. Like, those are kind of tanky-esque items, but Magnus don't care about that. Magnus just wants speed. So you want to make sure you're going first every round, specifically the first turn, but then you want to ensure that you're going first the later turns too. There's even an armor that says you can't be slowed. That's a really good option for him. Yeah. Should be everything. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will catch you later. Peace.